Welcome to the Ben Mulroney Show on this Monday. It's the beginning of the week. We got a lot to get to. Mark Carney is busy, very, very busy. Bill C5 is the government bill called the One Canadian Economy Act. Actually, the full name is an act to enact the Free Trade and Labor Mobility in Canada Act and the Building Canada Act. This is going to be central to breaking down inter-provincial trade barriers, unlocking the potential of the Canadian economy to the tune of possibly as much as $200 billion a year in lost economic activity. And he is suggesting that in order to get this done, that the Parliament might have to sit a little bit longer. You know that one of my chief complaints has been, if we are truly in a crisis, then nobody should be taking a vacation. They should be working on Parliament Hill. And yes, I concede MPs do a lot of work outside of the House of Commons, but there's real work that needs to be done. And I'm glad to see that if they need to get it done beyond mid-June, I think they will continue to do that work. He's also doing a lot of work on the idea of building national infrastructure projects. And here is what Mark Carney said about whether or not he would impose a project on a province if that province said, no, we don't like it.
We will not impose a project on a province. We need consensus behind these projects, and we need the participation of Indigenous peoples. I'm going to add something. I'll translate it into French, yes. Which is what's encouraging from the First Minister's meeting in Saskatchewan is that many provinces came together in support of projects that would stretch across provincial boundaries. So, for example, the Western and Arctic Corridor would be an example, or the Energy East Partnership. That's Energy East Partnership, not pipeline, to be clear. And that's an example where that consensus is forming, understanding that we need to work together in order for this to happen. Much more, of course, needs to be done.
So we are still getting to know Mark Carney and what his government stands for in real time. There's a lot to like, and we're going to be talking about some of the things that I'm going to give him a standing O for a little bit later. But on this one point, the fact that there has to be a national consensus. What does that look like, Mr. Carney? Nobody has asked him. Define a consensus. What does it mean? And if there is no consensus, but there is value in the project, do you commit to building that consensus? I think that's a fair question to ask. And what does a consensus look like? Because if Premier Eby in British Columbia says, I don't want a pipeline going through British Columbia, but poll after poll says the majority of British Columbians say they want it, then who's right? Where's the consensus? And if you've got a scenario like that, then isn't it incumbent upon the Prime Minister to cajole and convince that Premier? I haven't heard him answer that question yet. So it does concern me. Now, that being said, maybe it shouldn't. Maybe I am just being a little overly critical or a little too judgmental, because you have a woman like Premier Danielle Smith who's been critical in her own ways and very forcefully of for the former Liberal government and this new government. She is quite bullish on the prospect of being able to shepherd forth these infrastructure projects of national importance, even if, say, somebody like Premier Eby is against it. This is what she had to say about that.
I know that this is good for the country. I know that he's on Team Canada, and I can't imagine in the end that if we meet the issues that have been raised by British Columbia, that he would go off Team Canada. That doesn't seem to me to be the type of person that David Eby is. I think there's some concerns we have to address. We have to have a proponent. We have to make sure that we have a route. We've got to make sure we've got Indigenous buy-in. But in the end, I mean, we did get 2 pipelines built to the coast. We got the Trans Mountain pipeline built. We got the Coastal GasLink built. That was under a more hostile federal government. And I think that it's because we addressed the objections, and that's our job. We're going to make sure that we address the objections, and we're going to get it built.
So if Danielle Smith on the right side of the political spectrum is bullish on this framework that is being laid out by Mark Carney's government, that's great. That's great. Maybe I'm being overly critical. And if Carney's getting buy-in on the right, but also on the left, well, that's saying something. Here's Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew on what Canada can do to become an international energy superpower.
So if we look at this moment where Canadians want us to be able to build our economy, to become an energy superpower, to become the strongest economy in the G7, to be able to get our natural resources, our ag products, our manufactured goods to market, having Tidewater and having the base load power to energize a trade corridor is a winning hand to be played.
I love that. Like from the left to the right, everybody is optimistic at this point. So that's really good. But, the devil is in the details. And like I said, it has felt in the past like this Liberal government is leaving itself a crack in the door that they might be able to slip through in order to get out of building certain things. And that crack is the national consensus. But Mark Carney's not the only person that journalists are going to for answers on what this framework is going to look like moving forward. Tim Hodgson is our new Minister of Energy and National Resources. And he told Rosemary Barton that once a national project is identified, there will be a few determining factors before they move ahead.
So it's a collective. There's 5 in the legislation. Mm-hmm. One of them is it has to be beneficial to Indigenous peoples. Okay. I think that the Prime Minister said that typically would mean Indigenous ownership as a standard. Yep. There'll be some situations where that might not be what Indigenous people want, but that's sort of a standard, and that it will need to honor our obligations to climate change.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what are those obligations? That's another thing. Like, we've got some very high standards in this country, so high, in fact, that they've made us less competitive with other jurisdictions who are doing actually better on climate change files. And so do we have to go back to the table and look at that stuff? I think maybe we do. And specifically, there were a number of Trudeau-era pieces of legislation that tamped down on Alberta's potential. Here is what the new Minister of the Environment, Rebecca Schultz of Alberta, said about this idea of consensus, and where was that consensus back in the day?
I think that's one of the challenges is what does the federal government define as consensus? Our premier is working very closely with premiers across the province to look at places where we can find common ground to get things built and make sure that we are working in the interests of provinces across our country. But of course, if we want to talk about consensus, there certainly wasn't consensus when the Liberals brought in Bill C-69, Bill C-48, an oil and gas production cap, a clean electricity regulation. So that should be, quite frankly, all the rationale they need to step away from those policies.
Yeah, that's very well said. And again, so the minister just laid out some of those environmental policies. Are those the standard that we're going to hold ourselves to? Because if they are, that's going to significantly limit what we are able to build as a nation. So again, devil's in the details. And so many of these pieces of legislation are intertwined, and one is the cause and the other is the effect. So there's a lot that they are going to have to overhaul if we are going to unlock the potential of this nation. That being said, a lot of good came on this file over the weekend. I'm patient. I'm optimistic about how this is going to shepherd forward. Don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more to come right here on the Ben Mulroney Show. Thanks so much for watching the show. Now, if you enjoyed what you saw, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode of the Ben Mulroney Show.